Most people at one point or another in their life find themselves in an amount of debt and they start to stress about it and wonder, how can I pay this off? With only about 1/4 of Americans reporting that they don't carry any form of debt, it is no wonder that a lot of people try to find the best method to pay off debt quickly. Now, in general, there's two main methods to pay off debt. One being that you attack the debt balance that has the highest interest first, and that's known as the avalanche method. Or there's the debt snowball method, which you attack the form of debt that has the smallest total balance, and you pay that off, and then that builds momentum, so you are more incentivized to pay off debt faster and faster. And there's a lot of debate which one is better. Mathematically, the avalanche method is, supposed to be a lot cheaper in the long run. But I also think the avalanche method and people who advocate for that are heavily discounting the psychological effect of the debt snowball. Now, I'm going to go against the grain on this debate entirely and say that it really doesn't matter which method you choose as long as you're motivated to pay off that debt. Think about the debt balance that has the highest interest. Usually that is also the debt balance that has the lowest balance in total. For example, credit card debt typically carries a lower balance than, say, a mortgage or student loan debt or even auto loans. Those interest rates usually are, 6%, 7%, 5%, whereas credit card debt is usually about 22, 25%. But usually you have a lot more student loan balance than you do for, a credit card balance. So either way, you end up at the same point. The second point I'd make is that, if you think about dieting, for example, there's people out there where working out works best for them, and they don't necessarily care at all what they eat whatever they want, and that works for them. But there's other people out there where working out isn't necessarily favorable for them. It makes more sense for them to focus on what they're eating. And, there's a lot of science and data to, support both methods. And the reality is you got to find out what works for you and stick with that. Now, to start, for the sake of argument, I'm going to go ahead and assume that your income matches your expenses. And if that's not the case and you find yourself spending more and having to accumulate debt because your income isn't necessarily enough, then that's a whole separate discussion. But I would at least like to say that, you're going to have to take a hard evaluation on your lifestyle. And the reality is I like to think about it this way. If debt is stressing you out right now, it is not going to get any better, in the long run. If you can figure out a way to get out of debt right now, or even if it takes 3 or 5 years, however long it takes, then after that point on, the rest of your life, you're living debt free. And if you're in this mindset, that debt is stressing you out right now, and there's nothing you're wanting to compromise on, you have to really realize that, life is not going to get better down the road magically. You're going to have to make compromises. Now, the reality is, because your income matches your expenses, to pay off this debt at a faster rate, you're going to have to find a way to make extra income somewhere, or the other option is actually to cut expenses somewhere in your budget. And if you're trying to find a way to add extra income, I actually just did a video recently about this, but in general, it shouldn't be too difficult to make an extra $200 to $250 extra a month. I list off a few ideas, but in general, for example, if you just took a job at Starbucks, I've known people to make anywhere from $9 to $11 an hour pretty easily just starting off, and then plus to get pretty good tips. I've known people that usually just work, 1 8-hour shift on the weekends. They would just work Saturday for 8 hours. If you took those 8 hours per day for 4 weeks during the month, at $10 an hour, you're actually making $320 per month. And even if you took taxes out, you should definitely be making somewhere between $200 to an extra $250 a month. Now, back to my debt example, once again, income matching expenses. Let's say you have 2 credit cards, one with $5,000 in debt and one with $3,000 in debt, which in total is $8,000, which is actually the national average for consumer debt. Then add $30,000 in student loan, which once again is actually average, and $11,000 for an auto loan. Anything more expensive than that, then I would highly encourage you to either sell that car or downsize to a smaller car. You could buy a Yaris, for example, for $8,000, $9,000. So if you find yourself with a $15,000 car, I'd highly encourage you to sell that car, because once again, the overall goal is to get debt free, not necessarily have a car that, it has leather seats and, is very comfortable to drive in. So in total, you're almost at about $50,000 in debt. And we're going to go ahead and assume that this is how the monthly payments break out for a total of $950 per month. So if you use that full $200 to pay extra on your first credit card, you can see that it goes from taking almost 2.5 years to pay just that one credit card off to less than a year. You can use a debt payment calculator to verify these numbers or just play around with the numbers yourself. Now, the thing I think people forget when they're thinking about tackling their huge amount of debt that they have is that once you pay off one form of debt, that minimum payment you were making for that form of debt, you can actually apply it to other forms of debt. Plus, you have that extra income that you're applying to that first form of debt that no longer exists. And you combine that all to pay off other forms of debt. And you can see how these payments add up and pay off debt really quick. So now that you paid off that first form of debt, the minimum payment on all these forms of debt is actually $800 now instead of that $950. But because you were doing fine having paid $950 a month, just keep doing that and use that to pay down the debt even faster. There's no reason to start taking that extra money off the table and starting to add more expenses. So now for credit card number 2, you're paying the $200 for the minimum payment, the extra $200 from the extra income, and the $150 that you were paying for credit card 1, but now you're applying it to credit card 2 since credit card 1 is paid off. So I'm actually simplifying some of the math here because when you're actually paying off credit card number 1, because you're making those minimum payments on credit card number 2, there's actually more calculations needed to figure out the exact time frame on how long it would take to pay off credit card number 2. But for this purpose, I'm going to ignore that because it really doesn't amount to much when we're talking about this amount of debt. So now the credit card that would have taken 3 years to pay down in total would actually have taken just 2 years to pay down in total. So now in just less than 2 years, you've paid off credit card number 1 and credit card number 2. Now you're paying $800 on the car. And then once you have that paid off, now you pay everything you have to the loan. So that $200 in extra income, the $200 minimum payment on credit card 2, the $150 credit card payment for credit card 1, and the minimum payment you were making on that loan, combine that all together, you're paying off $1,150 on your student loan. So as far as income and expenses, nothing has changed since the beginning of attacking the first form of debt as far as your first credit card. So now instead of having it seem like it's going to take 11 years to pay off the student loan and that this is an unsurmountable amount of debt, now it actually takes less than 5 years and it only took 2 years to get credit card debt free. So now this debt actually begins to seem more manageable. So as I said, you would actually have to do some more math to figure out the specific time frame on when you would have all the forms of debt paid off, but it'd actually be shorter than what I'm implying here. But in general, you should be able to cut that debt payment time frame in half. Now, 5 years may still seem like a long time, but the reality is we're talking about, the whole entire lifetime of living debt free. So if you're 35, for example, and you have this amount of debt, you'll be living debt-free from 40 onward if it just took you 5 years to pay off this debt. So even though 5 years may seem like a long time, it's pretty much irrelevant when we're talking about the rest of your life living debt-free. So I can't stress this enough that even though it may seem like it's impossible, there's been people out there that have paid off hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and, they really stuck with it. And not a single person, I bet, it has come back and said something along the lines of, I really regret sacrificing 5 years of my life to be debt-free for the rest of my life. The thing is being debt-free is a huge weight off your shoulders. So if it helps, I encourage everyone to pay off their debt for at least a year. Just give it a try because a year is a time frame reasonable enough that anybody can kind of get behind. And I have a strong feeling that after a year, you're going to be motivated enough to stick with it and maybe even motivated enough that you're actually starting to see real results happen. So that's it for this video. If you found this video useful at all, or if you appreciated this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it a lot. And if you think there's anybody out there that might benefit from seeing this video, please give it a share with them. And if you like personal finance videos or videos about financial topics, I post one every Wednesday as well as Saturday. And if you like videos about financial news or economic updates, I post one of those every Monday as well as Friday. So please hit that subscribe button. I hope to see you in the next one.